9:20. Welcome back. Alan Quinlan, good morning to you.
Morning, lads.
How's it going? We had a great plan to be chatting away about Leinster and Munster and all sorts of stuff, and then I picked up the Irish Daily Mail this morning and I saw O'Shea in the mix, or if you may turn to ex-Ireland stars, Jones feels the heat. So he's obviously there in a director of performance role. Is that his something like that? And so that there's a possibility that if Jones goes, I mean, if he goes, they kind of need to decide now, don't they? Like, this needs to be either you leave now.
This stuff is kind of getting out and leaking out, even though the review hasn't been completed. Maybe they've had their meetings this week, and but it's kind of strange that it's out there now that this stuff is. Conor O'Shea's been linked. There's lots of talk about different coaches taking over. Warren Gatland, Scott Robertson,
Borthwick,
yeah. So I have a feeling this mightn't go well for Eddie Jones. I think there's a lot of kind of rumblings and obviously for England to be having the results they've had in the last 12 months, the last couple of Six Nations as well. So
if they were to do that, Quinny, the like O'Shea in one way and Borthwick obviously to the same degree, given what they would know, given that there's a Six Nations only around the corner, surely it's probably an interim appointment that gets them, I don't know, past the Six Nations.
Yeah, because it's a tricky time unless someone like Warren Gatland or Scott Robertson were to say, well, look, I'm coming in for the next couple of years and I'll sign up. But this has been probably driven by what will dictate this, Adrian, I think, is the players. They'll go and talk to players. And unfortunately for Eddie Jones, there's been lots of rumblings about, maybe the way he treats people and different coaches. There's been a fair rollover of coaches there over the years. The way he's kind of runs this kind of ruthless kind of environment and stuff like that. But not every coach will please every player and vice versa. So there's always going to be some players who'll say, well, I don't like that coach, and some will be incredibly loyal. So if you ask someone like Owen Farrell, because he's been captain and he's been a mainstay, he'd probably say something really positive, where someone like Mike Brown, who played, got dropped, wasn't picked, was frustrated, says something different.
I saw
that always happens.
On that the Good, Bad and the Rugby podcast during the week saying, and he's in all the squads, saying that
he's the kind of fellow who'd.
Well, it was put to him that, like,
coaching, he still probably turns up and
the
just
rumours
out
there that there's a split in the camp, that players are not happy, and he was like, I mean, maybe what else would you say? But he was certainly fairly definitive in the sense that
it wouldn't surprise me for a character like him, because he's that kind of fellow who doesn't really care, and coach wouldn't affect his psyche. He's kind of that free spirit, and he's a very good player. So it wouldn't surprise me like that. But when you run a kind of a tough, ruthless environment, which, it's top-end sport. It's not mollycoddling either. You have to have a bit of pressure and you have to have standards and all that kind of stuff. But then when results starts creaking a little bit, you hear little things that certain guys, you could get more out of them. On paper and the evidence of what you see from England players, they're underperforming. They're not a team that maybe are as dominant. Given the players they have, and I'm not saying they have this wonderful talent of 30 players that are unbelievable, they're world's best, but you see what Rassie Erasmus and Nienenberg have done to South Africa. You sense that England are kind of a bit of a sleeping giant like that. If they have a little bit of change, maybe there is a lot more potential. I don't know. Eddie Jones has, had great success for himself in his coaching career, but he's kind of been up, down for the last number of years. And, England are one of the powerhouses of world rugby. Whether we like it or don't like it as Irish people, that's the way they are. But you sense now that, they're not really sure their identity. They're not really sure which way they play. Can they overpower teams like traditionally they've done? The results just haven't been good enough. So I suspect they will make a change. I don't know. And, as I said this on Monday to Ger, I said Eddie Jones is, he's very outspoken. He's always kind of throwing little jibes at different coaches, different players. And, he's a real character in the game. And but I think something could happen out of this,
Quinny, is it not a bit of an exercise in futility then, asking the players what they think about Eddie Jones? Because you're going to have, as Will said yesterday, you're going to have 15 who love him and 15 who hate him.
Bill Sweeney, the chief executive, and other people who are in the decision making, they'll on the QT will be
have
what's
their own
it really
decision.
like. They'll try and garner that information as to what the environment is like and what do the players really think, and Do they need to? They won't hinge it on that. Ultimately, it doesn't matter if you've a dictator running your team if you're getting results. And usually, if you are getting results, it's it is fairly ruthless, Shane. You know what I mean? But we've a lovely balance and what's happening now. With the type of leader we have in the Irish rugby team and Andy Farrell, they'd love to get him back. I would think. I think he's learned a lot and matured. But Eddie Jones has done. People would argue and say that the results just have not been good enough in the last couple of years, and that's the reality that he faces, and that's the kind of pressure he's under. And yet, you look at their World Cup draw, and you could quite easily be a semi-final draw. Yeah, of course, yeah, and that's what they've done it before, haven't they? And there's every chance. That's why it could be an attractive proposition for a lot of coaches. And if they if it stays as it is, I still think they will be a serious threat next year. But there's been a lot of changing in the coaches over the years, the assistant coaches and stuff like that, and that stuff doesn't happen if there's a good environment there. It doesn't usually happen. One person we know isn't, or most likely is not, getting the gig or taking the gig is your buddy. His advisors have got in ahead of the curve again here, got their statement out and ruled themselves out of the English job. And well, it's played out ideally for him obviously now, and it looks like, I don't know, has he actually signed, or he's going to sign up until 2027 to stay in La Rochelle as the head coach. And he's often spoken about the decision is not just his decision, obviously it's a family call and the setup that they have, but this is ideal for him now. And it's sort of, because I have to say, every other time we have him on, it's oh, you've been linked with this gig or that gig, whereas now it's no, listen, I've 5-year contract to run here, and that's all done now, it seems. Yeah, he hasn't signed, and he said it in his article this morning that he would be frustrated if people think he kind of used this situation, and he likes a bit of humour, and you can slag him about things like that. And to be fair to him on that, he it was after he gave that interview to BT after one of the Heineken Cup games the other year, was it last year, when it wasn't of his making that all this stuff come up. We were asking him about it. What are you going to do? You have to kind of respond to it. Yeah, and look, he's a year and a half into the head coach gig, so there's a year and a half left, so it's not a surprise that they would be discussing his future, you know what I mean? I don't think you'd want to let it run into the last year, and it's going well. They like him. The players like him. They've spoken. Jules Favre was on, at that BT launch. So we heard Malachi Fekitoa at it during the week. And I know if you're asked about your head coach, you're not going to say I don't like him. But you sense Will Skelton. There's a lot of them saying that they have this kind of relationship that's you can read between really the lines what players say. And obviously I know him very well, and I know that that's his approach anyway. He would absolutely lambaste you if you weren't doing your job, but loves to have a bit of crack and get that balance right. And that's always the intrigue with any coach, you know what I mean? I can't say that it's the exact way you should do it, but that's what I feel the way it should be. It feels like it's a more long-term approach rather than the Jose Mourinho, the Eddie Jones, all brim and buster. Sometimes you need to go in and have this ruthless and cut out the dead wood and really have a pressurised situation where you're ruthless in your decision making and all that kind of stuff. But the coaches who last are the ones that are respected by the players and that they feel that they're getting a fair crack at the whip, and if they don't play they get proper feedback, all that kind of stuff. There's a balance. Who'd want to be a coach? It's a very high pressurised job. When results are going well, it's great. ROG hasn't experienced that kind of low dip where you lose 5 games and the crowd are starting to get on your back. And maybe he never will. You don't have to. But what happened last year, winning that European Cup, gives you credit for a long, long time, because it was just the scenes afterwards and it united that team. So he's in a good position and happy where he is, I think, and he's come out and said that now. As someone who knows him well, Quinny, is ROG the type of coach that you think you would have liked to have played under? Yes, because he was the same as a player. And I've said this many times, he was effectively like a coach when he played, because he spoke a lot at meetings, and he always spoke for the reason of making the team better. If we lost the game, he was very vocal in reviews, would pick you out and would be very honest and open in the way you played and stuff, but always kind of have an ability to tell you, you can do better, and I believe you can do better. So he always had that intrigue, the same way as Paul, natural leaders that I would have been seen on a regular basis. You know, Paul had the same kind of ability to do that, and really trying to get better all the time, and a great standard as players. So Rog was, yeah, of course, he helped me a lot in my career and helped lots of players around him, and you know, turned up and did his job really well, had a high standard, and got the best out of himself. So I would have, because you know, he was very, very good and a great driver in the successful team that I would have played in.
Let's talk about the rugby. 2 games to touch on. Obviously, Saturday night URC action at the RDS. It's first against second, and you've been very impressed with Leinster. They obviously got the job done in Belfast earlier in the not that long ago, a couple of months ago. So you expect it to go with form again, or what's your expectation?
Yeah, well, they're going to have a lot of their, you know, frontliners back now, and this is going to be a tougher task for Ulster. Ulster have, you know, probably been the closest to causing them problems in the last couple of years, and they've that ability to, you know, to put them on the rack a little bit at times. But you've got to be impressed with Leinster again. I know usually we're talking about the business end of the season and what happened last year, and that's where they'll be judged again. It's no surprise that they're going to be right at the top of the league, and you know, in the playoffs and in the knockout stages for Europe as well, I think. But you know, points scored in the league, they're first. Points tries scored first. Points conceded 16th. So it tells its own story that, you know, the stats and numbers that really, really matter, they're top of the pile. And even when they make all these changes, they seem to, you know, get the job done and be ahead. You know, you look at the Scarlets game a couple of weeks ago, the Welsh players are missing, the Irish players are missing, and they go over to Wales and they win 30 points to 5. Dominant, new players, new caps. So it keeps kind of rolling that group of players and what they're doing. But of course they're going to get, you know, it's the business end of the season, and that they'll want to deliver and bounce back from the disappointments of both the URC and Europe last year. But they're showing no signs of wilting or weakening. But I think Ulster have improved a lot again, and they've added a little bit to the squad, to the environment. Obviously, Kitsoff is coming in, Rory Sutherland is in there. They have a little bit of more steel about them up front, and obviously very, very talented players. You know, James Hume is a wonderful player. Having Luke Marshall back, Balakoon, Stockdale back in the mix. There's a lot of players now that are starting to mature and fronting up to big challenges. But you think it's going to be a tough one from tomorrow night. But they're capable of causing Leinster problems, and as I said, they've done it in the last couple of years.
And a lot of players with points to prove at the RDS as well.
When you talk Ulster as well, John Cooney could be facing Ireland in the World Cup next year for Scotland.
During the week, and again, we've heard the rumours, and you couldn't blame the guy. If he's not going to be in the mix, he may get a crack at the World Cup. His dad is Scottish, so you couldn't hold against it. I think he'd be a fool not to do it at this stage. If he's out of the Ireland reckoning, and that's probably
3 years since his last
Cup. Yeah, so he seems to be, so he'd be a fool to do that. But
well, whether he even gets into the Scotland team,
not to do. Well, it'd be worth a crack, you know, but obviously tonight, your favourite team are over in Edinburgh, Munster. You're always slagging us.
To tell. Well, it's
Edinburgh,
a tough assignment for them.
Team.
Like an emotional week for them. Mike Blair's spoken about the fact that they've chatted a lot about Doddy Weir this week. They're asking fans to turn out in support of that. You mentioned about the internationals back in the RDS. A raft of internationals back on both sides, and a tough assignment. All the makings of a great game, that one.
Yeah, it's a very tough task for him. I think when you see the players that are back, the only kind of chink of light here for Munster, I think, is that sometimes when you bring back all your internationals, it takes a little bit of time to get back up to speed with the calls and the setup. But I think the bad thing for Munster is that kind of emotional situation over the Doddy Weir's passing, and that's a kind of a night for them to try and honour him. And you know, they're asking all the people to turn up and do that and
where they're
see if they and all that kind of stuff. So that adds to it a little bit, but it's a real kind of pivotal game for them, that if they go and get their something there, you know, it'd be an incredible result, really, given that there's a lot of top class internationals playing for Edinburgh tonight. Munster on the back of, I know they've made a couple of changes, rotated the front row, but Gavin Coombs back in, so they have a little bit of playing time together, this group, and that was a problem from early on up to the 7th round at 57 players used in the league, which is incredible. You only see that kind of stuff at the end of the season. But against Connacht last week, and I know Connacht will be really frustrated by that because they had opportunities, but Munster just had that little bit of composure at times, still made mistakes and errors. Their maul was good, their set piece. Connacht caused them a lot of problems in the scrum. So they're coming up against Schumann tonight, and Lewin De Bruyne and others, 2 South African props. They've 2 South African props effectively come off the bench as well, in Venter and WP Nell, even though obviously WP Nell has played for Scotland for a number of years. So that's an area they really got to get right, and a tough task for them tonight.
Who's going to, in a word?
I find it difficult to see Munster getting the win because of the team that Edinburgh have played, and this is the type of team. I've mentioned Edinburgh in dispatches before and saying, look, they're a side that can go right into the playoffs. If they had all these players available, they could cause anyone any problems. So I think Edinburgh may be too good, but I'm optimistic that Munster, if they get it, if they get building that little bit of momentum they have, who knows, they might cause a problem.
It's becoming important for them to get more points on the board as well. You're going to be back on Monday morning with reviews of all that.
Connacht are playing Benetton tomorrow as well at home, so they've got to win to try and get up the table, given last week. So they're in the same situation now. Games won as Munster, games lost.
Johnny Sexton been linked with Connacht in one of the papers this morning as the new head coach when Andy Friend leaves. That'll be a conversation for another day, Quiddy. That's a whole can of worms that we'll have to save some time for. Thanks a million for coming in.
Cheers,
enjoy the weekend.